Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the A3 assignment, which is the proposal. So keep in mind that we're going to talk about all this stuff more next week and the week after, but this is just in case you want to start thinking about it. So it's 900 to 1200 words. Most students keep their A2 topic. So you ended up with a specific thesis that you're defending, and that's convincing your target audience to accept your claim is the purpose of your A2. You can come up with a whole new topic and go in a new direction for A3, but I would recommend that unless you absolutely hate it, you keep something related to what you wrote about for A2, just because it'll make the research process easier. For your A3, you need to pick an audience that is specific enough that you could put the proposal on their desk. It doesn't mean it has to be one person, but I want you to be thinking about how would you actually distribute the proposal if you were planning to send it out. So the American public's no good, even the American public in like a certain age range. I want you to be getting more specific than that. The general idea for the A3 proposal is that you identify a problem that has exigence, which means it's important to your audience, and you propose a specific solution. Generally, proposals use section headings and address their audience directly. Remember, I kind of pushed you away from addressing the audience that way in your A2. Now you'll likely want to do that. Just like A2, we already talked about counterarguments. There will be counterarguments in your A3 as well, and they'll come from your audience. So you're going to be asking your audience to do something, and so they probably will have concerns and questions, and so those are the things you're going to be wanting to address. So a thesis for a proposal is a little bit different. Instead of just making a claim, it has to involve the solution that you've come up with to the problem you've identified. And so in your introduction, you'll talk about that problem, you'll identify it, you'll go into it a little bit, being specific, and then you'll propose a specific solution to the problem, and that kind of is your A3 thesis. So I mentioned this a minute ago, but in terms of audience, theoretically, you could keep the same audience for this paper as you had for the last one, but only if they meet certain criteria. So one is the one I was already talking about. Are they specific enough? So for some of you, some of you kept in mind an audience of a single person for your A2 paper. So in that case, they are specific enough. For some of you, it wouldn't be, so that would be the first thing to think about. But then even if they're specific enough, you have to think about what are you proposing? What problem did you identify? What solution are you going to propose? And does the audience that you had for A2 have the power to do that? So you can't ask your audience to do something that they're not able to do. For example, if you're talking about the noise from ships hurting the sea animals, and you're talking to people who go to the beach, you have to find a way for those people who go to the beach to actually be helpful. The people who run those shipping companies, it's a little bit simpler. They could change their practices, but the people who go to the beach don't have any clear way to accomplish what you're proposing. So you have to match that up. So if your A2 audience matches and it's specific enough, then maybe you can use them. But then you also have to think, can your audience be convinced? And are they a fence sitter? So you picked a fence sitter audience for A2, but depending on what problem you've identified within your topic and what solution you're proposing, that audience might no longer be a fence sitter. And you might not be able to convince them to do it. So I think for many of you, you won't end up with the same audience you had in A2 because it won't meet all these criteria. But for some of you, it might. And if that's the case, then it's totally fine to keep that same audience. The last thing I want to talk about just briefly here is the timeline for the unit. So it's a 3-week unit. Just for some perspective, we're just wrapping up a 6-week unit. So A2, we had 6 weeks. We only have half the time here. That's the main reason I recommend that you not bail on your general topic. Even if you change, even if it's not quite like your thesis, I would probably recommend keeping the same general area of research. So once we wrap up the A2 paper, the first 2 weeks of A3 of this unit will be before spring break. So we'll get comfortable with the idea of A3. I'll talk more about genre conventions and that sort of thing. In week 2, we'll talk about multimodal elements. We'll go further into your problem and solution. We'll start working on a rough draft. Then we're going to hit spring break, which is going to be a bit strange to be 2/3 of the way through the unit and then take a break. I won't be assigning you things that you have to do over spring break, but if you can give any attention to it, that would be helpful. Then we'll come back the first week after spring break will be our standard end of a unit week, where we have the online workshop and then the rough draft. And then you turn the paper in, and that'll be due on Sunday, April 25th at 11:59.